What's going on, guys? So in today's video I want to talk about the most common problem with vintage and antique Zippos and how you can fix it. So this is the Chet Beach Zippo, the 1946 Zippo I got at the antique shop, and I refurbished it. And all I did, which I'll bring you through the process here, it was very simple. It's what I do with some of the older Zippos. Sometimes I don't bother to do it, but you basically take some rubbing alcohol. The percentage of alcohol doesn't even make a difference. You want to put on a rag and completely wipe everything down. You take the insert out of the case and you want to get as much of the actual dirt and grime and stuff off, okay? After that, what I did was I used some of my favorite polish, Flint's polish. This tube I've had for, God, 10 years, 11 years, something like that. It takes very, very little each time. I put a little on a rag, okay, and then I go and I polish it very, very lightly, okay? So keep it on a flat surface. And all it is a fine abrasive, so I'm getting a nice smooth polish. I'll turn, I'll get all the sides. And what I'm doing is taking off basically just the very, surface, just microns, you know what I mean? It's a very fine polishing agent. For example, you can see, it feels like glass. It's super smooth, but you'll see there's still like this part here. This is not dirt or anything. It's not even rust. This is the chrome that has deteriorated off of the brass that's underneath. So it's a little bit of brass showing through. Now, if you compare this to the original video, that was a much larger spot because there was actual surface rust that was on top of it. So I cleaned off all the rust by polishing it. It's got a nice gleam to it and shimmer and stuff, but it still is intact. It still has the original, wear and tear on it. There's some scrapes here. There's a little dent right there by the, where the case and the lid meet and so forth. The hinge on this is still very functional. Of course, there's a little play in it, as you would expect. This is from 1946. So anyway, besides just making it look a little bit nicer and feel nice and smooth, it is 100% fully functional now. What I had to do to repair this, and this is the point of the video, I'm going to tell you that this is the most common problem you're going to get with really old Zippos. In the first video, I'm just talking while I'm letting this cool since I just lit it, I mentioned that as years go by, the flints that are in your lighter deteriorate. They literally turn to dust or powder. Oftentimes, after they deteriorate and they turn to powder, they get stuck. They clog the tube, okay? So when you take the insert out, you want to undo the screw here. Let me take out one of my handy dandy tools here just to get this screw started. Okay. So of course this is your screw that holds your spring in here and your flint. There's a spacer on there as well. So be careful opening this. Okay, see that space? I mentioned this before in the past. That's not a flint. That's a spacer that pushes on the flint. Okay, and as I tilt this, the flint should pop out. All right, so there's our actual little flint. So what oftentimes happens is the flint turns to powder, but then it re-solidifies. It could get moist, there could be humidity, who knows, just with age, and it clogs that tube. So a lot of times you'll get a wheel that spins, and you'll take this out and you'll put a new flint in, but it still spins freely. Now, as you put a new flint and everything and you screw this back down, if you push it all the way in, you see how there's a little gap? Let me use this here as a pointer. All right, see how there's a little gap between the top of this tube and the bottom of the wheel? You're supposed to see that flint. So if you push this in and screw it down and everything, and it still looks like that, there's still a little gap there, that's because there's an obstruction. That actual flint has deteriorated and clogged the tube. Oftentimes the actual flint, when it gets small enough, it'll turn sideways and it'll jam inside that tube. All right, so make sure when this is fully in and screwed down and everything, if you see a gap there, that's all it is. There's just something clogging the tube, and that something 99% of the time is going to be your deteriorated flint. So what I did was I took a very, very small hex key that was able to fit into this tube. You can see if I push all the way up, see how it reaches the entire length. So you want to get something that's small enough that's going to push whatever blockage is in there out. Now, the biggest problem with this is that the wheel is riveted on, so you can't remove the wheel. If this was screwed on, you could take the wheel out. It would be a heck of a lot easier because you could just push all the way through. But you can't access it from the top. You can only access it from the bottom. So this is a huge pain in the butt, but what I did here was I took my pliers. These happen to be some SOG pliers. held the bottom with the pliers on the tool. All right, and I went like this. And I did this for probably 25 minutes because remember, it's old and crusty and solidified in there. So I jammed it in there and it was hitting that little flint blockage. I'd pull it out and I'd knock some dust out. And it would just be a little bit of dust at a time. I was chipping away at it, kind of like, you know, I felt like a really old prisoner, you know, hitting a rock. You know, back in the day, I guess, they would have to break down massive boulders to dust. I don't know, I guess keep them busy. That's what I picture when I'm doing this thing, but I'm just, you know, hitting it, and repeating this process, knocking out the dust, hitting it, knocking out the dust. If you had a sharper thing, maybe even if you had a long pin or needle or something, maybe that would chip away at it easier. Who knows? But about 20 minutes later of repeating this process, it was clear. I can get the tool to go all the way through. Then I kind of like rubbed the sides to make sure there was no blockage. So when everything's all said and done, when you put in the flint, okay, drop in your flint, you put in your tube. Now, if you happen to have a spacer that's missing, you can just put 2 flints in there, just a little Zippo hack. All right, because sometimes when people take these apart, that piece will fall out or something, but that is just a metal spacer, so it keeps even pressure. If you just had the spring, it just doesn't push on the flint in the proper way. So you could double up the flints if you need to, but you're gonna push this all the way back in. You carefully screw this back down and get it started. I'm gonna make sure that I'm not cross-threading or anything. Okay, and in all Zippos, you want to be able to see that flint. See how the flint is sticking up a little bit? That's what's going to give you your spark, okay? And I only put enough fluid in here to kind of get it started. But there you go. So we have a functional insert. So my $2 purchase happened to work out just fine because I was able to fix that. But I'm telling you, there's so many people out there that buy these old Zippos, and they could be 10 years old, 20, 30, 40 years old. This is over 70-something years old. In 1946, you do the math. 70-something? I don't know. Off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, that is a very, very old lighter, but it functions just the same as the ones that are sold today. So very happy to have refurbished this. Let's add some more fluid in here. This is how I add fluid, by the way. I close the cam and flip it around, put it back in the case in case it drips out. I've done videos on this before, but this way, once it's done being filled, you rotate it just like this and pop the cam back down. All right, so this way, if you are filling it and it's dripping out the bottom, it's not falling everywhere. All right, which is hazardous and messy. So we're gonna pop our top on our fuel. This did not have the felt pad on the bottom, it was just the fill. All right, I took all this fill out and I ended up pushing the wick up a little bit and trimming the wick as well. It is the original padding and the original wick. Now, that's it. You don't have to fill it until you see fluid falling out. That's too much. You just want to saturate the fill, that's it. And now inside the wick is kind of weaved back and forth in this fill, so as that gets saturated, the wick gets saturated and it rises to the top, and that's how, you know, your lighter works. Now when your lighter gets too dry, your actual wick starts to burn. You don't want the wick to catch fire. So if you know, let me leave this upside down for a second, let gravity do its job. But if you light your Zippo and your actual wick is like smoldering, it's too dry. Okay, you want the fuel to burn around the wick, not the wick. So as time goes on, when your wick dries up and gets burnt, it doesn't hold the fuel anymore. So that's another problem with Zippos, is that when you go to light it, it just sparks. Even though you know you have fuel, it's not lighting. It's because your wick is probably, you know, just a couple of wires. There's no material left to hold on to that fuel. So that's when you would lift it up and trim it. But yeah, so that's our 1946 Zippo, fully refurbished to a functional lighter. All right, but the main point of this video I wanted to make was that if you have these old Zippos and if you're not getting it to spark even though you put a new flint in, that's probably what's happening, is there's a blockage in the tube. And like I said, I mean, I don't know what else would possibly be in there. 99% of the time, it's just old flint that's deteriorated and re-solidified into like a little concrete block. All right, it's like a plug, and you have to kind of scrape that plug out from the bottom. All right, so it might be painstakingly slow process, but it's worth doing because obviously you could fix the lighter, pop a new flint in, and then you're good to go. So there's not a whole lot of things that can go wrong with old Zippos. The only thing you really want to test for, the one thing that I can't personally fix myself, is the cam spring. All right, so underneath this cam, there's a piece of metal. It's just a spring steel. When those break, the cam flops up and down. So if this is floppy, there's nothing you can do. That has to be sent back to Zippo. But keep in mind, it doesn't matter the condition of the Zippo. Even if it's fully broken, the cam spring's broken, I mean, the wheel's missing. If it's $2, you can still send it back and they'll replace it. Remember, they have like the best warranty of any company ever. There's no questions asked. I've shot Zippos on purpose, send it back, and they replaced it. So if you find any Zippos in any condition in any year that you could buy for less than $10, you can send it back to Zippo and they'll give you a brand new one, and the cheapest Zippo they sell is $10. So if you look at it that way, it's always a win if they're less than 10 bucks. So anyway, that is all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. And in the comments, why don't you tell me your oldest Zippo that you either use or happen to have in your collection? I know some guys that have really old Zippos and they love using them. That's the whole fun of it. As I mentioned before, the value of this, I mean, yeah, it's worth something, but it's not so ridiculous that I'm scared to use it. It's kind of fun to be able to use a 70-plus-year-old lighter, you know, and when you break it out, it's still recognizable. It looks pretty much like what they look like today. I think that's pretty cool, and that's why I enjoy the hobby of Zippos. So hopefully you guys learned something. If you did, let me know down in the comments. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow with another video. Take care.